We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we explore the art of songwriting, celebrate incredible artists, and dive deep into the stories behind their music. I'm your host, Simon Fink, and as always, thank you for joining us. Our guests today on the podcast are the impossibly smooth Durand Jones and The Indications. The contemporary soul and R&B group from the United States have captured hearts across the globe with their lush, neo-soul-inspired sound and electric live performances. Formed at Indiana University over a shared love of dusty 45s and classic songwriting, the band have since released 3 acclaimed studio albums, supported the legendary Lenny Kravitz on tour, and have been praised by outlets like NPR, Rolling Stone, and The Guardian. Today they're releasing their gorgeous 4th studio album, Flowers. In today's episode, we are lucky enough to be joined by the group's 3 main songwriters, Durand Jones, Frazer, and Blake Rhein, as we dive into the making of Flowers. We discuss the songwriting approach for this record and how it leans even further into the classic soul and R&B sounds that have always shaped their music. We also talk about how each member continues to grow their own thriving solo careers and what it's like balancing those projects while keeping The Indications a creative home base. Plus, we get into the specific tracks on the record and ask the question on every Aussie fan's mind, when will we see the guys back down under? Now, we want to say a massive thank you to Emma for her help with today's episode and remind everyone that Flowers, the brand new record from Durand Jones and The Indications, is out today. You'll find links in the show notes on where you can stream or buy the record, follow the band on their socials, and check out all of their tour dates. While you're there in the show notes, make sure you follow us across all of our socials and subscribe to this podcast. Doing so means that you'll always be up to date with new guests and episodes when they come out. Now, let's not keep you any longer. Here is our conversation with Durand Jones and The Indications. Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Durand Jones, Frazer and Blake Rhein from Durand Jones and The Indications. Gentlemen, hello, how's it going? Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. I'm super excited because there is a brand new Durand Jones and The Indications record coming out when people are listening to our conversation. It is called Flowers. It is a sonically stunning record, gentlemen. So firstly, congratulations on this. I imagine that it must be, I imagine putting out any new music is always exciting, but I imagine that when you're kind of sonically trying something a little bit different or progressing in the band's evolution, that it is exciting to put this out. Durand, I might ask yourself first, is there always a sense of excitement or anticipation when the band is putting out new music?
Absolutely. But I think for me personally, I'm more excited about this one than I have been for our last 2 projects, I would say. And I think I'm really excited for this one because I just hear the growth. I just hear so much growth. And I really appreciate the guys allowing me to apply what I've learned over the years into what Flowers has become. It's been a really cool process. So this is my favorite album that I've ever done. I'm really in love with this one. And, Aaron, he's been saying a good bit we made this one for ourselves. And I really do feel that truly and deeply within me.
I love that, though. I think it is, it almost sounds, from an outsider's perspective, it does weirdly sound like a very personal record. There seems to be almost a sonic maturity in a way, almost. The songs are sounding Yeah, I don't know what the kind of word that you would use is that is maybe not maturity, but there's a certain sonic element where you guys have almost gone back into more of like the soulful aspects and like the traditional R&B almost of like what the band is. Aaron, I'm curious, when yourselves, when the three gentlemen and other members and kind of the band's inner circle get together and you're starting that process of a new record, do you sit down and talk about what it is that you want to try, what it is that you want to cover? Or is it something that just kind of what organically happens is what happens?
It varies, like there'll be times when somebody comes in with a scrap of music in progress, or, we have enough trust with each other to open up our voice memo apps, and anyone who is a songwriter of any sort can relate to just having hundreds of small ideas that are usually like they're so close to being nothing. They're just like these mumbled dispatches, and you have to try to like decipher what your past self in that moment in a restaurant trying to like do it subtly into your phone before the idea leaves you was trying to say. And sometimes we'll as a collective we'll try to like pull real meaning out of those ideas, or sometimes we'll just like listen to music until something just like fires up everyone enough to be like, yeah, let's do something like that.
I absolutely kind of love that, though. I think from what I heard for this record is that you almost took it back to those original and kind of like basic first steps that you did with that first record when the band first started making music, in terms of hanging out, listening to I think demos, and kind of almost, from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Blake, maybe I'll ask yourself, in terms of those that these were like one-time demos that you then kind of built the songs off.
Yeah, I think that, the building songs from a demo was something we did on the first record, and then kind of haven't done again since then until we got to this record. And that required a lot of trust in ourselves and each other, to be like, we like how this sounds. We don't have to re-record it in a nicer studio. If we like it, we're not going to go through the heartbreak of chasing and trying to recreate this thing that kind of happened by accident, which is the amazing thing that happens when you demo something, and it can be so frustrating to try to recreate a moment. And when you just get it right there in the studio, it feels good just to be like, this is good enough. And I think investigating what good enough means, I think sometimes good enough feels like almost it has a negative connotation, but I think there's something really positive and be like, this is, there's something really valuable about knowing when you have enough. It's kind of abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset,
Well, I also imagine that there's a level, as you kind of said and alluded to, there's a level of trust and knowledge between the three of you, and the fact that you've worked together so well and in such close quarters for all these years and created this music, that I imagine that it's kind of that thing that you recognize each other's strengths when you are creating, and it's almost that you're not overcooking it. It's that what it is. What's the word? It's almost instinct in a way. What's coming out is instinct, and that it's then in its most purest and probably almost best form in a way. You don't want to kind of focus on kind of nailing it too much, or else it loses some of that magic.
Yeah, Durand is the culinary expert here, but I know just enough to know that you can overwork the dough. You can overwork a good cut of meat, and you can actually ruin it.
100%. I imagine that with these songs, there's quite a few that had this beautiful, timeless quality to it. We were very lucky enough to have a listen to the record before it's come out, so thank you very much for that. Rust and Steel, I Need the Answer, just two examples of some beautiful, beautiful kind of songwriting. When you are doing that, when you're going to the studio and it's a like that base level, letting things kind of organically happen, is there a certain method that you follow, which I understand might be a bit of a crazy question, but is there a formula to when you're creating the song, or is it, I imagine it might be different for each song as well then?
First of all, thank you very much. Like, timeless is a description of our music that feels like the highest compliment. You know, there's this poet that I love, and she has this quote where she's like, sometimes I laugh and I forget what century I'm in. And I really feel like that with music sometimes. Sometimes music puts you in a beautiful place where, like, you know, you could drop that needle any decade and people would absolutely love it, you know. And, you know, just to hear the sentiment of, you know, our music sounding timeless is a high compliment to me. I would say, like, we've tried so many things with songwriting. Like, there isn't any like true method. You know, sometimes someone will bring something in. Sometimes we will create something out of nothing. I feel like, you know, and also like we're a collective. So sometimes Steve, Blake, and Aaron are, you know, getting together and making some stuff. And sometimes it's maybe me, Blake, and Aaron. Sometimes it's just Blake and Aaron. Sometimes it's just me and Blake. Sometimes it's me and Aaron, you know, like that are like doing things. So it's very unconventional. And I don't know, I guess that's a part of like the spark. I don't know. Every time I'm in the creativity mode, workshop mode with these guys, yeah, I really feel something that I never quite felt with any other group that I've worked with. And yeah, it just has this I guess unpredictable creativity that's really cool.
I kind of love that, though. I think some of the best art and creativity comes from almost not being able to put your finger on exactly what it is, that there is just that magic there. And I think that's all across this album. I am going to be maybe a little bit selfish at this point, gentlemen, so I am very sorry. I want to ask about my favorite track on the record. I know we mentioned the word timeless. Really Want to Be With You. I do want to ask very quickly, who brought that to the table, if I may be so bold to ask?
That was Jones.
Sir, I have to say, chef kiss. There's some Motown chord structures there. There's some gorgeous kind of like the changes in cadences kind of going on there. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Wondering whether you might be able to talk us through where that song kind of came from, and then maybe Aaron or Blake, if you wanted to come in on how it was then it was built more in the studio.
Word up. I think it was like 2022. We had just got off the road with Jack Johnson. And instead of going home, I went to go see an ex. I spent a week with them, and it was beautiful, but we both kind of knew that it was the last time. And I got back to San Antonio, and I immediately just started to think of this hook. And yeah, it just kind of stemmed from that. I figured out, it's kind of crazy. Sometimes you have to open yourself for a song to come through. And if you don't like jot it down or get it down real fast, it'll be like a dream you can't remember, but you can't forget. If that makes any sense. Just like something that just slips out of your mind, but you can kind of recall it. So I just spent some time figuring out the chords and all that stuff. And I brought it to the guys. And they immediately, embraced it. And I couldn't have finished or saw this song through without the pros, without the production that the Indications bring. I'm super proud of this one. I even shared it with my ex, and yeah, they were cool with it too.
I think that's probably a sign that you've executed it pretty well. If they're like, "Oh no, you're right on this. Yeah, this is pretty good."
Yeah.
Aaron or Blake, wondering whether there might be any insight for yourselves when Jaron brought this track in, and I guess like what the Indications brought to the track once he brought in that kind of foundation for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one where I think like the vision where that song wanted to go was super clear. And that's a credit to Durand and like the growth, like that he's shown like over the course of all these albums as like a songwriter to like bring in this vision. It's crazy to hear a song that's not finished, but when the vision is so clear that everyone can like see what that final product is supposed to look like. That's I think kind of the trick of like collaborative creation, is to be able to say like, we're building a house and this is the kind of house I'm envisioning, and then at the end you wind up with this building and it's like, how close was it to the house that you were imagining? And it's like that is totally dependent on like your ability to like convey exactly like the specificity of how you want stuff, and B, the openness to being like, oh, well, that wasn't the exact like color of the walls that I was envisioning in my head, but actually you had this different color than I wouldn't have thought of, and it actually works really well. So it is like it's a push and pull. But in this case, I think Durand just had a really amazing like clarity of vision that we were just following his lead, and it took a couple iterations. This was not one where we were like, oh, the demo, we recorded in the demoing room and then just like built on top of that. The energy was there, but I think with disco specifically, that's like a subgenre that like requires a good amount of like precision, and especially this sort of like, it is disco, but there is like this like Philly soul, four tops, spinners type thing that also requires just like a lot of like maturity in terms of like not making it a rock song. Even though the energy is up, you maintain that poise. And so for us on the rhythm section, it's having the experience to not do too much. And then I think a lot of credit on this one should also go to Tiffany Johns, who is the arranger, who Durand and Tiff, like, she understanding reference points as an arranger like is really difficult to make something that feels authentic, but she really understood what we were going for. And there is this rollicking, constantly changing, very little repetition it's like through composed, which is like very impressive to make it like both singable and feel familiar, but to also have it be like changing subtly underneath. So yeah, I mean, I think, we re-recorded the rhythm tracks in Valentine Studios, which is really, really cool. LA kind of frozen in time 70s room. And then brought in our friends, as we always do, bring in our musical community to help with the overdubs on the strings, on the horns, on the background vocals. And all the while, Durand, it was cool, like Durand being in the tracking room. I have some good pictures of Durand being in the tracking room with the strings, because Durand has like classical music background. And for Blake and I, like, our strength is not the like classical knowledge. Our strength is like being in the control room, listening to takes, listening to the variations, seeing what we can comp, what we can nudge. And so like our skill set sort of working in harmony, I think, is the only way this song could have come together in the way that it did.
I absolutely love that. Thank you very much for kind of providing that insight, because I think it is a stunning track. The whole album, as I've kind of said and will continue to say, is sonically stunning. So thank you very much for kind of sharing it. I am also really curious, when you have such a strong band of songwriters respectively, I know that all three of you have your own kind of projects outside of the Indications. And Durand, I know you have a solo career under your name, Aaron under your name, and Blake, I know that you have yours under Patchwork Inc. Blake, maybe you can talk to this one, that how does it work, maybe from your perspective, when you're three different songwriters, three different projects outside of that main one? How do you work out what's right for the band and maybe what's right for the solo project? And I wonder for all three of you whether that ever crosses over, whether anything ever starts out as a band song and maybe ends up as a solo project song, or vice versa.
That's a good question. I think a lot of times it feels pretty obvious, like what's going to work for the band and what's not. But there's definitely times, where we've pitched songs for the band and then it just, you want to see that initial spark amongst your bandmates, and sometimes if it's not there, it's like, okay, cool. Like I can kind of shelve this and put it somewhere else. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about having the solo projects is that like, if someone brings an idea to the table and it doesn't belong there, it doesn't die. It can go live somewhere else. And I think that's made the songwriting a lot within the group a lot more open in a way, because that means that it's like, okay, I don't have to relentlessly fight for this idea. It's not going to die. It's just going to go over in this other box now. And then when you do hit those moments where like you're starting on a song and everybody's excited about it, it's like, okay, yeah, let's chase this. And there's nothing better than that feeling of like when you bring something for the group and everybody's like into it and everybody's like adding ideas that really just like elevate the song. And like I think those are the moments that I felt most exciting to chase on this album. And it was amazing to have all the time we did writing together and have those moments feel maybe more frequent than ever, where like someone would bring an idea to the group and everyone was like, yes, let's do it,
100%. I think that, there's a really magical quality in the fact that all three of you are able to have those separate projects that are all distinctly their own thing, but also magically bring them your talents and kind of skills to the Indications as well. I do want to talk about some live shows as well, because I know that there are a number of live dates across this year. I am curious, and maybe I'll go alphabetically for this one so we can get everyone's kind of take. I know obviously we don't play favorites, but I imagine that there must be certain tracks that you're looking forward to bringing into that live arena, whether it's the challenge of, transforming it from the record to that live space, or whether it's just something that you enjoy playing. Aaron, I might start with you and then I'll go Blake and Durand after that.
Ooh, tracks on the new record that we're looking forward to playing live. There are, that's a lot of them. Great answer. I think that one I'm looking forward to, now I'm blanking on the name. If Not for Love is one I'm looking forward to playing, because it's kind of like, it's a unique feel, like it's a unique feel for within our discography. But I also think just like within the larger like soul movement, this chapter of the soul scene, which has grown beyond what we ever thought it would be when we started out in 2012, 2013. There's so much great music being made, and it's always really fun to find the pockets of like things that we contribute that you're not going to hear across other artists or other labels. And it feels very uniquely us. It has both of our vocals on it. It's got like great call and response for the crowd, so that's one I'm really excited about. Fantastic choice. Blake, what about yourself?
I'm really excited to play Lover's Holiday, because I think it's great tempo. And, one of the things we never really restrict ourselves to in the studio is like, okay, we're never sitting there writing a song or producing a song and be like, well, how are we going to do this live? We kind of just make the record we want to make and then figure it out live. But that one, it is fairly minimal in its production. It really kind of centers around just piano, bass, and drums. There's a little guitar and percussion and background vocals, but I think that translating that to a live set is going to be pretty seamless. And then in that way, open itself up to kind of have its own life too. And so I'm really excited, just how fairly minimal the instrumentation on that is. And I think it's just going to be really seamless to put it into the set and really fun. I'm really excited to play that one.
I absolutely love that. Durand, what about yourself?
There's two. I think, but I'm gonna go with what I'm feeling right now. I'm gonna say Paradise. I'm really excited about that one. I love how the record opens up with that tune. That tune, in some sense, gives me some sort of synesthesia synesthesia, if that's how you pronounce the word. Like, it reminds me of the color green. It's so luscious. You can even you can even smell that tune in some sense, like it just feels luxurious, like a flowery scent of like some bird of paradise flower or something, like I'm really excited about that tune. We've been talking a lot about concepts of like maybe having flowers on stage, and I don't know, just like doing that one with the intro. I don't know, it'd be so fun to start a show or a couple with that tune. I think the audience would just like absolutely flip out. I love how crisp that song sounds too. I'm really looking forward to that one.
All fantastic choices from all three of you gentlemen. I think that these are going to be some really, really special shows when you do hit the road. I also recognize the silliness in asking these questions because full disclosure to people listening to our conversation, although the record is coming out in the middle of the year, we're maybe chatting in April, and it was only last month that you were here with us in Australia. So I recognize that asking when you might be back is a bit of a selfish and silly question, but almost feel like I kind of have to ask at some point, maybe in the next 12 to 18 months, can we expect to see you gentlemen back on Australian shores in support of Flowers?
I mean, hopefully. We had such a great time in Australia. There are lots of Australian bands that I really loved over the years. Like, earliest being probably when I was like 13. I heard Cat Empire, and was just like so into their mix of like soul music. They had the horns. They had this rock element. There was like hip hop element. They were like scratching on some songs, and then just like over the years, seeing like the indie rock from Courtney Barnett and like College of Knowledge, like Surprise Chef, Karate Boogaloo opened for us. Of course, like Hiatus Coyote, Napalm stuff. It's all sick. So yeah, I don't know. I've loved Australia for a long time, and now seeing that the audiences were just as cool as all the artists that I grew up loving, I definitely want to come back.
I think that there was a lot of love for the band when you guys were here last month. So very excited, and hopefully we'll maybe see something announced at some point in support. But until that point, very excited for this record. It is called Flowers. It is the brand new record from Durand Jones and The Indications. But thank you, Aaron, Blake and Durand, for coming onto the podcast today to chat about it. I appreciate it.
Pleasure, man. Thanks for coming.